When I tell people I don't believe in forever, they usually assume I had a bad breakup. They have no idea that forever once wore a wedding band and stole $500,000 of my future. I was sipping coffee in my Manhattan office when the email popped up. Subject: Transaction alert. $522,000 withdrawal. At first, I thought it was some kind of glitch. My college fund, my dream, wasn't supposed to be touched. It had been safely growing for years, a promise from my late father that I'd have the freedom to build the life I wanted. But as I scrolled down, my heart sank. The money had been transferred to my husband's account, and a note attached to it read, "Wedding expenses, Lauren and Tyler." Lauren, my sister. The same sister who'd called last week, gushing about how generous my husband had been to cover her wedding costs. Back then, I thought she was exaggerating. Now I knew the truth. I remember staring at the city's skyline through my office window, the glass reflecting a woman everyone thought had it all. Perfect career, perfect marriage. But behind the glass, I could feel my pulse pounding, betrayal crawling up my spine. He hadn't just taken my money. He'd taken my trust and charged me for the privilege. Soft pause, voice steadying. That was the moment I realized some debts aren't financial, they're personal. And I was done paying for his choices. Back then, I was 24, newly married, hopelessly in love, and convinced that Tyler Monroe was the kind of man who'd never let me fall. He was charming, ambitious, the kind of person who could talk his way into any room and make everyone believe he belonged there, including me. I remember the night we moved into our first apartment. It was small, one bedroom, barely enough space for his guitar and my sketchbooks, but it was ours. We ate takeout on the floor, laughing about the future. When he promised he'd take care of everything, I believed him. That was my first mistake. My father had left me a college fund, money he'd saved his entire life. He used to say, "Haley, knowledge is your insurance policy. Don't ever let anyone cash it in for you." Those words came back to haunt me later, but at the time, I just smiled whenever I saw the account balance. It wasn't about greed, it was security, independence. Then came my sister, Lauren. Beautiful, impulsive, always the center of attention. She'd gotten engaged to Tyler's best friend, and from that moment, it felt like every family conversation revolved around her wedding. The dress fittings, the venue, the dream ceremony. Tyler became her hero, stepping in to help with planning, managing the finances when things went over budget. I thought it was sweet, the way he cared about family, until I started noticing the tension in his voice whenever I asked about money. One night, I came home early. The door to his office was half open. I heard him whispering, numbers, bank names, my name. When I stepped inside, he jumped. He mumbled something about just checking on taxes. That's when I saw it, the transfer request on his laptop screen. My college fund. $500,000. I froze. My throat felt dry, like swallowing glass. "Tyler, what is this?" He didn't even look ashamed, just tired. "It's for Lauren's wedding," he said. "You weren't using it anyway. And it's family, Haley. You'll understand." Understand? That he'd stolen from me to play the hero in someone else's fairy tale? I remember walking out, not because I was brave, but because if I stayed, I would have shattered. That night, I packed a small suitcase, grabbed my father's old watch, the only thing that still felt like safety, and left. As I stood at a cheap motel window, watching the city lights blur into tears, I whispered the words my father once told me. "Knowledge is your insurance policy." I just never realized he meant knowledge about people, not just books. And in that moment, I made myself a quiet promise. I would rebuild. And this time, no one would touch what was mine again. Starting over wasn't glamorous. It was waking up in a rented studio with peeling paint and a leaky faucet, eating instant noodles while pretending it was all part of the plan. But every night, I'd look at my father's old watch sitting on the bedside table and remind myself, time moves forward, so will I. I took a job at a small marketing agency in Brooklyn. Nothing fancy, mostly coffee runs and data entries. But I watched everything. How campaigns were built, how clients reacted, how emotion sold better than logic. And late at night, when the office lights went off, I stayed behind, teaching myself graphic design, branding, strategy. There was a woman there, Monica Reyes, head of accounts. Sharp, confident, the kind of woman who walked into a boardroom and owned it without raising her voice. She noticed me once, sketching out ad concepts on scratch paper. "Haley," she said, "you've got an eye for stories. Use it. Don't wait for permission." That became my mantra. I started freelancing on the side, small business logos, product launches, social media campaigns. At first, I barely made enough to cover rent, but slowly, things began to shift. Clients came back. Word spread. By year 2, I'd saved enough to rent a small office space, a desk, a laptop, and a cheap plant that refused to die no matter how badly I forgot to water it. Then came my first big break, a luxury skincare brand searching for a fresh marketing voice. They didn't know I was working alone from a one-room office. I gave them everything: strategy, visuals, storytelling. When their sales doubled, they sent flowers with a note that read, "You made us believe again." That night, I cried, not from sadness, but from relief. For the first time in years, my success was mine alone. Monica later became my silent partner. She helped me register my company, Luma Creative Group. We grew fast, quietly, strategically. While my family thought I was doing some freelance thing, I was building one of the most promising boutique marketing firms in New York. I kept my social media plain, no bragging, no luxury posts. When Lauren called to complain about wedding debts or Tyler's new business struggles, I just listened. No anger, no bitterness, just silence. Because I had something they'd never understand: peace built from persistence. By the 5th year, Luma Creative was working with national brands. My name was on contracts, trademarks, invoices. But the world didn't know. I preferred it that way. The day my company hit 7 figures, I didn't throw a party. I drove to the lake outside the city, the same one my father used to take me to as a kid. I sat there with his watch in my palm and whispered, "Dad, I did it. You were right. Knowledge was my insurance policy." And as the sun dipped below the water, I finally realized the money Tyler stole didn't destroy me. It funded my fire. Every sleepless night, every tear, every doubt, all of it became fuel. They took $522,000 from me, but I built something worth millions in dollars and in dignity. 5 years later, I'd almost forgotten what betrayal tasted like. Almost. It was a bright Thursday morning when my assistant buzzed me. "Haley, there's a walk-in. A man and a woman asking for the director. They said it's urgent." I was reviewing campaign drafts, half listening, until she said their names. Tyler and Lauren Monroe. For a moment, my pulse stopped. The names sounded foreign, ghosts I'd buried under late nights and deadlines. I took a slow breath, straightened the cuff of my blazer, and told her, "Send them in." They walked in like people who hadn't slept in days. Lauren's designer heels looked worn, her perfect hair now a rushed bun. Tyler, older, thinner, wearing that same charming smile that once fooled me, except now it looked tired. "Haley," he said softly, as if saying my name could erase everything. I gestured toward the sleek chairs across from my desk. "Please, sit." The room was silent except for the low hum of the city outside the windows. They looked around, at the minimalist art, the framed awards, the polished marble desk with Luma Creative Group engraved on the glass. Lauren blinked. "This is your office?" "Yes," I said. "Mine." Tyler gave a nervous laugh. "Wow, you've done well for yourself." There was something rehearsed in his tone, admiration laced with guilt. He cleared his throat. "We actually came because, well, things have been hard. My business went under. Lauren's been struggling since the wedding debt. We thought maybe." He hesitated, eyes darting. "Maybe you could help. You've always been good with money." For a moment, I just looked at them. Not the way I used to with love or anger, but with distance. The kind that comes from knowing you've already survived the worst thing they could do to you. I folded my hands on the desk. "Do you remember when you said I'd understand after you took my college fund?" Tyler's eyes widened slightly. "Haley, No, I interrupted gently. You're right. I do understand now. You needed to be the hero. And you used me to do it. Lauren swallowed, voice small. Haley, we didn't mean it wasn't supposed to. I raised a hand. Save it. I'm not here to relive that night. I stood, walking to the window behind me. The skyline shimmered, the same city I once faced with nothing but a suitcase and a promise to myself. When I turned back, I could see their reflections in the glass, two people realizing just how far I'd climbed without them. This company, I said quietly, was built from the ashes of that betrayal. Every client, every dollar, every hour of sleep I lost, all of it started because you two decided my dreams didn't matter. I let the silence stretch. It made them squirm. Then I added, and now you're sitting in my office, asking me for help with money that I earned, the money you once thought I didn't need. Tyler leaned forward, desperation creeping into his voice. Haley, please. I made mistakes, but I'm still your husband. Ex-husband. I corrected softly. The divorce went through 3 years ago. You'd know that if you'd bothered to sign the final paperwork on time. He blinked, humiliated. Lauren looked down, tears forming. I sighed, not out of pity, but finality. You know what the hardest part of all this was? I said. It wasn't losing the money. It was realizing how easily you both justified it, how little my worth meant when it didn't serve your story. Their silence was the only apology they had left. I walked back to my desk, pressed a button on the phone. Jessica, I said to my assistant, please arrange a car service for our guests. They both looked up, startled. Haley, wait, Lauren began. I met her eyes, calm and unwavering. I already waited, I said. Now it's your turn. As they left, I saw the reflection again. Me standing tall, them walking away small. And for the first time, I felt nothing but peace. Because the best revenge isn't payback. It's presence, standing in a life they swore you'd never build. I thought I'd close that chapter after they left my office. But life has a strange way of looping back, not to reopen wounds, but to see if you've really healed them. A week later, a letter arrived. Handwritten. From Lauren. She said Tyler had left to figure things out. The wedding debt had swallowed her savings. She'd sold her jewelry, moved into a small apartment, and was working part-time at a boutique. At the end of the letter, she'd written, I know I don't deserve it, but if you could help me start over, I'd never forget it. I stared at that sentence for a long time. Not because of the plea, but because, for the first time, it didn't make me angry. It just made me tired. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, same city, same skyline, completely different woman. And I wrote her back. Lauren, I will help you, but not with handouts, with chances. A week later, she showed up at Luma Creative, nervous and quiet. I offered her a position in the admin department, entry level. No favoritism, no shortcuts. She hesitated, maybe expecting humiliation, but I looked her in the eye and said, if you want to rebuild, start where I did, from the bottom. And she did. The first few weeks were awkward. Every time she saw me in the hallway, her eyes filled with shame. But slowly, I saw something new, effort, humility. For the first time, she wasn't the center of attention. She was learning what it meant to earn. As for Tyler, he reached out months later, asking for a meeting. I agreed, not because I wanted closure, but because I'd already given it to myself. He walked in wearing the same confident grin, but this time it didn't carry weight. He spoke about regret and fresh starts, and asked if I could invest in a new business venture he was trying to launch. I listened, patiently, then said, you once taught me a priceless lesson about trust, Tyler. I'll never forget it. But I'm done financing your lessons. He looked stunned, as if still expecting the old me to surface, the forgiving, accommodating version of Haley he once controlled. But that woman no longer existed. Before he left, I handed him an envelope, a single check for $1. He frowned. What's this? A symbolic refund, I said. For all the apologies I'll never hear. He didn't say a word after that. just left quietly, shoulders heavy with the weight of his own choices. Lauren, on the other hand, stayed. She worked hard, took courses, learned design basics. And one afternoon months later, she came into my office, holding her first client project. It wasn't perfect, but it was hers. Tears filled her eyes when I approved it. I smiled softly. Now you know what real pride feels like. I didn't forgive them because they asked. I forgave because I was tired of carrying their debt inside me. Boundaries, I learned, are not walls. They're doors you decide who to open for. And this time, I was the one holding the key. It's strange how peace doesn't arrive with fireworks. It slips in quietly, in the soft hum of a morning routine, in the calm way you sip your coffee without waiting for the next disaster. It had been 2 years since that day Tyler walked out of my office for the last time. Lauren was still at Luma Creative, now managing small accounts with a confidence that surprised even her. Sometimes, I'd catch her smiling, a real, grounded smile, not the performative one she used to wear at parties and photo ops. She'd changed, and I respected that. One evening, we were the last two left at the office. The sun was setting, painting the windows in gold. She walked over to my desk and placed a small box in front of me. "I think this belongs to you," she said softly. Inside was my father's watch. The one I'd left behind years ago in that house, the night I walked away. I hadn't realized she'd kept it. For a long moment, I couldn't speak. Then I smiled, not with sadness, but gratitude. Because that old watch wasn't just a reminder of what I lost, it symbolized everything I'd rebuilt. I turned it over in my palm, tracing the worn engraving on the back. "Know your worth." That phrase used to sound like advice. Now it felt like truth. I looked at Lauren and said, "You've come a long way." She nodded, eyes glistening. "Because you showed me how." That night, when I finally left the office, I walked through the city, same streets that once terrified me, now shining with possibility. Every window, every reflection, showed pieces of who I'd been and who I'd become. And as I reached the edge of the river, I stood there for a long time, letting the breeze tangle through my hair, watching the skyline that used to symbolize pain. Now, it only meant freedom. Somewhere behind me, the world kept moving, cars, chatter, noise. But inside, everything was still. I thought about all the versions of myself I'd been. The trusting girl, the broken wife, the woman who built herself from ashes. And I realized I didn't hate any of them. They were all me. They were all necessary. I fastened my father's watch back onto my wrist, feeling its familiar weight again. It no longer carried the past. It carried proof. Soft, deliberate pause, her final line. "They stole my fund, but they never stole my fire." And with that, I walked forward, into a life no one handed me, because I had learned to build it with my own 2 hands.